This week on the Hollywood and Toto podcast, I can't quit The View, but I think the show has finally gone too far. And we talked to actress Martha Byrne about a Hollywood story with a potentially terrible ending. We'll explain.
Welcome to the Hollywood and Toto podcast. Entertainment news and reviews without the woke Hollywood narrative. Free speech, free expression. Now that's entertainment. And here's your host, award-winning film critic, Christian Toto.
I confess, I can't get enough of View clips. I just can't. Social media, Instagram specifically, X, YouTube, you name it, there are View clips everywhere. It is the dumbest show on TV, and I'm a junkie. I can't get enough. Give me more. Give me more. So many great moments to savor. I think one of my particular favorites was when Whoopi Goldberg thought that Dr. Jill Biden was a real doctor. It's classic Whoopi. Whoopi being Whoopi. I just can't get enough. But lately, the dumbest show on TV, well, it's still dumb. It's been getting under my skin in a way that takes away some of the enjoyment. I'm not loving it like I used to. I'm not hate watching it with the enthusiasm and vigor that I've been doing for so long, and I miss that. So what changed? Well, I think part of it is the world around us has changed.
The world's going to hell in a handbasket.
There's so much violence going on, so much of it from the left, so much really incredibly irresponsible rhetoric coming out of different portions of the left. And so all the craziness of The View, it's landing a little bit differently. Is the show going from dumb to dangerous? That's a really, it's a hard thing to say. And especially for me, I don't like to put limits on free speech. And there's certain obvious examples where you can't directly threaten someone. And I know there are certain guardrails that exist on speech, and the whole thing, hate speech isn't even a thing. It's just another buzz phrase they use to try to clamp down on the real deal. But I want to read just a little bit of a recent View episode, just to give you a taste of what's going on in the show. It's reminiscent of what's going on outside the show's walls, into the culture, into the political space. I don't want to get too involved there. I mean, this is an entertainment-based program, but I do want to share a little bit of what's going on right in front of our eyes on The View. This is just a few days ago. So it starts with Sunny Hostin, who is, I think words fail, but let me just read a little bit of what she said very recently. I think Trump is trying to use the might of the military to suppress people's rights. I think that is very clear. When you use the military against your own citizens, that is a sign of fascism. He's Hitler again. Never takes a break. This guy is Hitler 24/7.
Heil Hitler.
Never mind that he was president from 2017 to 2020 and didn't do any of the old Hitler stuff. I mean, he failed miserably. Even when COVID came around, he could have been as draconian and as authoritarian as all of his peers on the left. No. He pushed a lot of the rights to the states, and he didn't lock us down directly. Although, to be fair, he was under the spell of Dr. Fauci, who, in a sense, did all that. So certainly not perfect, but far less than what the left was trying to do. Just check out California circa 2020-2021. That was a nasty time to be in that particular Golden State. But, of course, it's not just Sunny. It's other parts of the show weighing in, pushing the Hitler card again and again. Here's Alyssa Farah Griffin talking about Trump. Correct, but I think it's very important to remember it's a commander-in-chief that's made these decisions. They're following the orders. Of course, she's talking about the military members. Of course, Whoopi fires back. Yeah, think back, y'all. Where have you heard that before? Enter Joy Behar, 1938. Now, to be fair, she could have said 37, 36, 39, but she went with 38. You gotta trust Behar's gut. She knows what she's talking about. And of course, Goldberg ends the little segment by saying, I'm just following orders by my commander-in-chief. Again, we've had Trump before. We've got him now. He's trying to shrink the government. He's trying to protect free speech. There's a lot of good stuff going on. The Hitler stuff, I just don't see it. And you don't see it too, because it's not happening. And when there is a military intervention on the streets, with the particular protesters, it's because they're getting violent. They're burning cars. They're threatening cops. They're throwing bricks at cops. They're trying to enter federal buildings again and again and again. They're stopping traffic. They're causing mayhem. That's when you have to call in the cops, when the local police officers are either told to stand down or they're just overwhelmed, as one LA police commander said recently. So yeah, I'm not laughing as much at The View as I used to, and that makes me sad. Of course, it's a bigger picture. Who cares about my sadness or glee? There's always different ways to entertain ourselves. Watching The View for fun, you can just kind of scratch that off the list sometimes. But again, it is the atmosphere at this particular time with left-wing violence coming strong, whether it's Jews being attacked on campuses and elsewhere, whether it's people in Washington, D.C. being gunned down in cold blood, whether it's a healthcare worker being gunned down in cold blood, on and on and on. This is left-wing violence. It just is. Are there samples of right-wing violence? I'm sure there are. But right now, looking across the culture, it's left-wing violence. And a lot of these people, they don't necessarily watch The View, but they're basically reciting The View's talking points. Trump is Hitler. Trump is a dictator. Trump must go. We must stop him some way. The No Kings protests, hey, they seem mostly peaceful. Good for them. I always applaud a peaceful protest, even if I vigorously disagree. But the violence is there. It's all over, and it's not stopping. And if you're told again and again and again by a responsible, seemingly, press organization, remember, The View is under the wing of ABC News. If you're told he's Hitler again and again, what do? It goes back to the old quasi joke. If you saw baby Hitler, would you strangle him in his crib? What if you saw Hitler and could do something to stop the death of 6 million Jews and stop World War II? Wouldn't you do it? Well, aren't we in that moment, according to Whoopi and company? We're in that moment. We've already seen 2 assassination attempts against President Trump. We've seen people dying from the insane rhetoric going on right now, and they just keep pushing it out. Now, again, I don't want this to be clamped down. I don't think the show should be taken off the air. None of that. But by God, can we have an adult in the room take charge and step up and tell these people on the show to stop their incendiary, unfounded claims just maybe for a week or so? Could the ratings be worth it? I don't even know if the show gets big ratings. It certainly gets big enough to keep themselves on the air. Good for them. This is wildly irresponsible broadcasting, and it's time someone stood up. And it's been going on for months and months. There were rumors that they were going to hire another conservative to add to the View panel. We didn't see that. They kicked out Meghan McCain a long time ago. There's no one like her coming back for sure. There was another story, I don't even know if I believe it, where they wanted to kind of dampen down the political talk. I don't think that's changed at all. It's gone from dumb to dangerous. It really has. That's the transition we've seen at The View. And I have to say, I fear what comes next. Actress Martha Byrne's soap opera days never, ever prepared her for this. Her husband, Michael McMahon, was a decorated police officer in New York City, and then he retired and became a private investigator. And then a few years ago, he took up a case which seemed pretty benign. It involved money that was stolen from a Chinese-based construction company. Pretty standard stuff. He seemed to work through the steps. Nothing was really outrageous or out of the ordinary about this particular assignment. And then life moved on and didn't give it a second thought. And then the FBI came knocking one day and said he had broken the law. Now he's facing significant jail time for what he did. And Martha Byrne insists he's innocent. She's been fighting in the press, in the courts for years now to clear her husband's name. This particular case hasn't gotten a lot of press attention. I think the New York Post has covered it a time or two. They might be among the bigger outlets that give this some oxygen. But other than that, hasn't been a huge story. It is also not the kind of story I usually cover here. I mean, this is more entertainment driven. We don't kind of dig deep into these events. But the fact that Martha Byrne is a soap opera actress, the fact that she's using her ability to communicate, to share, to spread the word about the story, and the fact that we've seen a lot of FBI overreach in recent years, well, I decided to kind of shake things up a little bit on this show and include her story in this particular episode. Now, like I said, this is her story, and I really recommend you dig deep into this wherever you can find information about it online to get the full picture. I'm not an investigative reporter. This is not an investigative podcast. I did want to bring out her perspective on things, but definitely look it over, see what you can see online. I will have a couple of links on the show notes page so you can kind of start your information gathering process, but definitely find out some answers for yourself. But my spider senses were triggered by the story. What Martha has to say is pretty compelling, and I really wanted to share it with you, the listener, so you can make up your own mind and just find out more about what's happening within our government. I think that's important. In recent years, I've covered some Nick Searcy documentaries that talked about the overreach involving January 6th. This is certainly a very different case, but there are echoes of maybe the FBI going far or way too far against what could be a very innocent man. So I hope you listen to this podcast. Hope you check out the other information I've teased here and just consider what's happening in our country, in our culture, and why these stories, they shouldn't be ignored. Martha, thanks for joining the show. I've given the listeners a bit of a tease about what this really horrifying story is, but I think we need to hear it in your own words, and maybe we'll start at the beginning when this nightmare first began. I imagine that you thought, oh, it can't be this bad. It'll be simply explained away. But just take us back to the early days and we'll get into the heart of the matter.
So I met my husband when I was 22. He was an NYPD sergeant, very highly decorated, and got in a severe car accident on the job and became a private investigator, which he loved. It was a totally different aspect of using his brain in a different way, and he was so good at it. And he got a routine case in 2016. A translator had called, and her client had stolen money, had money stolen from him, and he was looking for assets. He wanted to know how many houses, how many cars, and Mike just did his usual. It was a very routine case, very basic actually, and hired 2 NYPD retired detectives who were PIs to work with him on it. Did a couple of days of surveillance, background checks, provided invoices, summaries to his client. And that was in 2017, April, finished the work and never thought about it again until the FBI came to our house on October 28th, 2020, during a pre-dawn sort of raid. I say sort of, and I can explain that in a minute. That was very odd. The whole process was very strange, not what you see in the movies. For violating FARA, which is the Foreign Agents Registration Act, and interstate stalking, which was baffling for many reasons. There was no evidence he was hired by a foreign government. We looked at every email. There was no evidence of that. And he's a private investigator, so parking on a public street is not a crime for anyone, including a private investigator. So he had notified the local police when he was doing surveillance. So he was putting the puzzle together going, what is this about? And of course, like you said, you think, well, they just have made a huge mistake.
Yeah.
This will be taken care of in a minute. And we are still fighting this almost 5 years later, because
now, the
once
raid
you fight
itself, we've seen I've seen footage from various documentaries on a different subject, different people in the crosshairs of the FBI, where it can be rather warlike and rather sort of aggressive. Was your FBI raid like that, or was it more calm?
Extremely calm.
Okay.
The agents walked in our foyer, did not put handcuffs on my husband. They're having conversations, petting my dog. My children were home. They didn't go to their rooms. And then Mike was like, what's going on here? And they said, just get dressed. We'll talk about it later. And he goes, do you want to go to my office? My guns are there. Do you want my computers? Do you want my phone? No. So he offered up his guns, his computers, his notes. They didn't even go to his home office. He walked out of the house without handcuffs on. So nothing. So my husband's like, in his career, how many search warrants has he done? Hundreds? He said, this was not normal for me to be able to walk around my house freely.
Yeah.
My children's, one was sleeping, and it was just nothing like you would ever believe or seen with other people who have been victimized. And I say victimized, there's a lot of trauma that goes into these raids, especially when they know the person's innocent. And you've seen that a lot with other cases that have been out there now, where they just ram the door, they shoot the dog, they throw you on the ground, anything could have happened. Anything like that could have happened that morning, which is frightening to me, because it didn't have to happen. My husband has worked on many federal cases, not just as a NYPD, but also as a private investigator. So his experience in the federal system as an investigator was very well known by the FBI. So they were aware that a phone call would have been fine.
Yeah.
He would have happily come down and talked to them and work with them. That would have been the best option in 16, 17 when they found out that he was connected to this case, but they didn't do that. But yet they made a scene and scared my children and traumatized them. I find that I'm sure some of them are parents, and to traumatize my children by choice, I find that something that I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive them for that. So it was nothing, it was very strange.
It wasn't guns a-blazing, but at the same time, there still was a threat involved, and there still was a really comprehensive effort there. This is not my area of expertise. I cover Hollywood. Was that atypical, either what you thought then or what you've learned since then?
Totally atypical. I mean, they know he has guns in the house. Wouldn't you be, the first thing you do, secure the guns? I mean, realistically, the arresting officer, I honestly believe this, and I'm sure I'll find out someday because I found out everything else. I bet you this was the first arrest warrant he ever executed in his career as an FBI agent. Gotcha. Based on his actions, which put everyone else in danger, not just our family, but the other agents who were there, the local police who were outside, knowing there were guns in the house. And if you truly believe what you're charging this man with, that he's an espionage spy for the Chinese government, why would you not secure those guns, gather all the evidence? If he's offering it, why would you not do that? But I feel like he was extremely inexperienced, and his inexperience put everybody in this situation in danger.
After this, you assembled all your paperwork. You kind of
everything, got
as much data as humanly possible. You submitted that. At what point during this process did you start to think, oh, this is serious and we could be in trouble, even though they don't have a case? There's something going on here that feels alarming.
When we did a presentation for the prosecutors within months after his arrest, which had all his evidence in there in a PowerPoint, 40-page PowerPoint presentation to the government, that we thought that would be it. Because now they know he has everything. He saved everything. He has more than what they thought he had to prove his innocence. This should be it. Yeah. This should be done. Well, they filed a superseding indictment against him after that. So that was their way of telling us, we're going to do whatever we want. We're going to pressure you to take a plea deal, which 99% of people do in these cases because they're scared to death or they don't want to go broke. There's threats, there's threats of more charges, but they couldn't charge him with anything else because he didn't do any. The guy had every T crossed and dotted I. He kept stellar records. This was not a sloppy guy, and he was not a typical, guy who's following cheating wives. Like, he had worked for the Vatican, done a case. He worked for the presidential candidate. He worked for the Parkland shooting survivors. He was their security. This is a guy who was a high level, respected.
Yeah.
So when they did that, that was kind of our first clue that we were going to be fighting this tooth and nail. So we started filing motions, like prosecutorial misconduct motions and venue motions and anything we could to stop them from continuing. They never spoke to Mike. The case agent in this case, the FBI case agent, never spoke to Mike. He never spoke to the two other NYPD detectives that were with him on this case. They never spoke to the two federal agents that Mike had discussed this case with back in 2016, 17. The FBI never spoke to them, okay? If this is such a high security, national intelligence, we're all in danger from the Chinese Communist Party, wouldn't you want to bring in these highly decorated U.S. law enforcement members to understand what happened here and learn more? Nope. They did not do that, the FBI, and they failed. They chose to speak with the Chinese agents who were involved many, many, many times, who lied to them and told them different stories. They fled the country. So this whole case is backwards, and it's shocking. to read. So that what happens is they send you discovery. That's like your first batch of discovery. You're like, okay, where is it? What are they going to try to put together? Every single interview, every piece of evidence in this case shows he's innocent, proves it. So they know. But what happens in federal cases, this is not state, this is federal. When you're dealing with the Department of Justice, FBI, they will suppress, they will manipulate, they will do anything they can to prevent you from submitting that evidence for your defense, and they withhold many things. Let's say you have a statement from someone who exonerates Mike, but that person has fled the country on their watch. You can't put that into evidence because that person isn't here. So I don't think people understand. It's like, well, just defend yourself. Mm-hmm. No. Because when the system is manipulated to have you fail, and they win 99% of their cases, federal government wins 99% of their cases.
I've heard that statistic.
Is that insane?
Terrifying. Yeah.
That's insane. But there's a reason for that.
The two other officers that your husband enlisted to help with this particular case, did they get any sort of similar treatment at all?
No, they only spoke to them after my husband's arrest. Mm-hmm. And one of them called the FBI back and said, something happening to me? And the agent said, you are not out of the woods yet. Mm-hmm. Which is, I'm sorry, that's a threat.
Yeah.
Okay. That's like, you better just stand back. Mm-hmm. And again, this is an NYPD retired detective they're doing this to, who I have happened to work in intelligence in the NYPD too. So when the FBI is treating them that way, you got to wonder, do they have any level of not just like brotherhood with other cops? And there was also something that was shocking, so many things, but two of my husband's former coworkers from the NYPD worked in the same field office as the FBI in New Jersey, and they were never spoken to in 4 years. So if you know there's two people who work in the building, and wouldn't you say, wait a minute, he worked with these two men. Let me just talk to them and see, like, what's this guy about? Like, is he good? What's your vibe?
Over every stone.
Nothing.
Find out what you can find. Now, can you briefly talk about the Chinese connection here and how it's important to this case?
It's everything. It's everything. Because when my husband was hired, all he knew when he found out the subject, he Googled his name and one picture came up on the internet. One. And it was a poster. It had 100 Chinese people's images on it, but it was about, they were accused of financial crimes, embezzlement, this and that. So when he gets the call and he looks him up, he goes, okay, I was hired to find assets. I was hired to find money. This guy had stolen money, he said, from his business. Kind of lines up, right? And that's all he thought about it. That was all that was on the internet about him at the time. So he just did his job. He worked for his client. He provided the documents that he was looking for, which was a financial chain of LLCs, businesses, cars. So there was a money trail there. Unbeknownst to us, there's a civil lane to this case, like a civil matters, which is what my husband was working on. And there was a criminal lane that the Chinese CCP was doing to allegedly, again, there's not much more to this, to force this man to go back to China. But Mike had nothing to do with that. He was totally separate. And about a year after he finished the work on this case, the person he was following was sued civilly for $30 million. And information in that civil lawsuit aligned with what he had found. So we're like, well, this is great. We can use this in his defense. Same LLCs, money, this. Well, guess what? The government successfully kept that civil lawsuit out of the trial, which was a gut-wrenching loss for us.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Chinese government is not going to meet my husband at a Panera Bread in New Jersey, which is where he met, and say, hi, guy, hey, would you come on a harassment campaign with us to get this guy to go back to China? And by the way, the meeting we have tomorrow at the law office that you're working out of, we're going to come hang out there for the day too and meet you. They're not going to give business cards going, that's what we're here for. So they didn't ask Mike to do anything illegal. They didn't ask him, because he never would, but they were very interested in him being a licensed private investigator. Now, why is that? Because the documents that he would provide have credibility. They are, and that's true. So they didn't ask him to, they didn't want him to be seen. He was never seen by the subjects. We went to trial. They couldn't identify him in court. So here he is being arrested for stalking, but the people can't identify him. They never saw him. That was shocking to me.
It's
But
almost comical if it wasn't so harrowing, and so it's so many.
Yes.
So the implications are so severe.
Yeah.
I watched an interview with you. I think it was 2 years ago. It might have been on Newsmax, and you talked at the time, and this was newish, and you were still in shock, I imagine.
Yeah.
And you said, "I don't see this as being political. I don't."
Right.
Do you feel the same way today, or is there something else that you've learned in the intervening years?
That's a great question. So when we're not political, we've never been political. It wasn't political for us, but it was political for the Department of Justice about China. In 2020, there was a lot of buyer's remorse regarding China with COVID going on and the United States relationship with China, and how it was a very complicated, if lack of a better word, relationship that the government had with China.
Yeah.
But in 2016, Obama was trying to bridge that. But when you're dealing with a communist country, they're not going to play nicey nice with you. So the Chinese government took advantage of that, and over the years kind of infiltrated our country with the spy balloons and the property buying and this, but under the radar for our Department of Justice was like working with them a little bit on other things. So it became political because why would they arrest him a week before the election in October 28th, 2020? COVID was rampant. Nobody was on the road. Everybody, all the bad guys had actually fled. So for them, it was a political move to show that they were doing something on China, either to impress Donald Trump, because he was really upset that we weren't doing enough about China, or to tell the next president, which could have been Joe Biden, well, we're sort of doing something on China, but because of your relationship with China, don't worry, it's just an optics case.
Yeah.
Okay. They were covering their bases, and I uncovered, and I don't say uncovered, this was public, a letter that it's the FBIAA, which is the association of, I think, 18,000 FBI, former, current FBI agents. They wrote a letter the same day as my husband's arrest on October 28, 2020. They wrote one to Joe Biden's and to Trump's team about keeping Christopher Wray in his position, whoever won the election, okay? So if you're Christopher Wray and you want to keep your job, who are you going to go after?
Yeah.
China. You're going to help Joe Biden, if it's Joe Biden, to say, well, we're sort of doing something, and Trump's going to be like, maybe they are doing something. So this is my takeaway. Again, I've written a book about this. There's more to it than that. And what's so shocking is, as I dug deeper, October 28th, 2020, a lot of things happened in the government on October 28th, 2020. Like, it wasn't just Mike's arrest. There was all these other things going on with China. And it was political for them. But you don't sacrifice an American family. You don't put our family at risk. There's something called the Duty to Warn Act that we have in the United States of America. If you are targeted by a foreign adversary, the government has an obligation to warn you and let you know. They never did that here.
Yeah.
And by not doing that, they put us all in a very, very dangerous situation.
I read a little bit about your case in the New York Post, at least one or two stories at least. And I mentioned the Newsmax interview, but I didn't see much else. Have you reached out to other media outlets for coverage? What's that been like? Has it been reticence to kind of go into your case? What have you found?
It's actually worse than that. It's the fact that the mainstream media didn't cover this case properly was deliberate. It was a calculated effort to not cover it properly. And I don't say that because I'm some tinfoil wearing a hat person. I know for a fact that the Wall Street Journal started this narrative of this case in July 29, 2020. And they're working with the government to protect the CCP in this case, which is shocking to say that out loud. I'll give you an example. The subject of Mike's surveillance was a former Wuhan official who worked in the district to monitor buildings. He was a high-ranking person. He was involved in fire codes and build, you know where I'm going here, right? So he fled the country in 2010, China, and not as a dissident, but alleged to have stolen all this money. Now, he's the alleged victim in our case. He testified at trial. Not one media outlet covered him being there. Mm-hmm. What he said on the stand was there to ask him any questions. Now, if I'm in the media and I know a former high-ranking Wuhan official is in Brooklyn, New York, testifying at a very high-profile case, why didn't anyone cover it? I was the only one in the courtroom. So to get people to hear the truth and hear our version was very, very, very challenging. So Newsmax was fantastic. They had me on. And when the Pipe Hitter Foundation, which is Eddie Gallagher's foundation to help falsely accused first responders, et cetera, when they took our case on, we started getting a lot of media and on the conservative side. Mm-hmm. And that was great. And they would let me tell the truth, tell our story. And then Jim Acosta wanted to have Mike on. And everyone said, "Oh, what are you going to do?" I said, "I'm going to do it. He's got to do it." Yeah. And he was wonderful. He was great to Mike. He asked great questions. Isabel Vincent from the New York Post was the only one who actually wrote the truth about this case from the beginning. She's amazing. But yes, it was a challenge because I couldn't believe that they weren't covering it. They were only attacking Mike. Mm-hmm. So the talking points that was coming out of the Eastern District of New York, the DOJ, they just parroted whatever they said. Never called us for comment, never wanted to interview Mike, never even reached out. Do you realize there's not one article since 2020 describing my husband's 78 medals, 1,000 arrests, his heroism on the NYPD, his career? Nothing.
I mean, this was shocking to you, and it should be shocking, but we've seen countless examples of journalists not doing their due diligence in this.
Oh, yes.
That's just, that's just the world that we live in right now. Obviously, your book, In the Interest of Justice, is going to share the story. I imagine this is just getting the message out as far and as wide as possible. I guess yes. the $1 million question is there a chance that the new administration could step in some point and do something? Do you have any indication of that? I mean, obviously it's your hope.
I definitely do. And I'll tell you why. We were invited to Trump's inauguration by the Trump transition team to be there mm-hmm. as their guests. I have met several people in his administration who were friends before they were even in the administration, who have been backing us, who've asked for nothing in return other than supporting him. I reached out to hundreds, if not, so many congressmen. The Republican Party was tremendous to us and supportive of us. Mike Lawler, Congressman Lawler, before he was even elected, said, "I'm going to help you." And he did. We had the GOP Oversight Committee, James Comer. They did a report on the CCP, and guess what happened? The DOJ got a failing grade in that report because of Mike's case.
Wow.
And they went out and said it publicly. They said, there is question whether this was a weaponization of the government mm-hmm. and whether Mr. McMahon ever should have been prosecuted under FARA in the first place. Well, when you see that, that gives you hope. That gives you hope that people are paying attention. And like Ed Martin, who's now, pardon attorney, mm-hmm. he's weaponization czar, Trump's weaponization czar, and associate deputy attorney. I've known Ed for a couple of years now. And he's always been so supportive of us. And he actually endorsed my book. He wrote a great quote in my book. It's right in the beginning, which is beautiful and supportive. So I honestly believe when Trump hears the details of this case, he's going to be horrified.
Yeah,
he's going to be hard because not only is he a supporter of the NYPD, but let's go even further. The lawfare, the weaponization, the lying, it's the same. They did the same thing.
Yeah.
To Mike with the same players. So I believe once he hears the facts and that an American family was sacrificed for the CCP in favor of the CCP. Chinese agents who are here. I mean, again, the subject he was following is not obtained a legal green card. He's not a citizen. His wife isn't either. They were named in a fraud case in California as committing immigration fraud, back in 2017. Why is the FBI helping them? I mean, even at trial, it came out that the alleged victims were communicating with the FBI and thanking them for their help with their immigration and the civil lawsuit against them. That's not America. I'm sorry. Why were they doing that and not protecting an American family? And let's even go beyond that. Why would you not bring in a highly decorated NYPD detective who has his resume is as long as his arm regarding cases? So I think Trump will be horrified. I know he supports law enforcement, and we're working on that every single day. I wake up and go to bed at night doing everything I can to, he's supposed to report on June 16th to federal prison for 18 months. I mean, he committed no crime.
Yeah.
So when he was sentenced, the judge didn't sentence him because he did anything wrong. She said he didn't have remorse. I'm not kidding. Like they said, he didn't have remorse for the victims. And he said afterwards, he goes, wait a minute, hold on. If they had come to me in 2016, all the things that happened to those people after the fact never would have happened. So who really put them in danger? The FBI, not my husband. So he's like, I can't apologize for something that I didn't do,
And that's just him being consistent with what he's just shared over the years.
Exactly.
All of this feels like this would make a triumphant movie, but we're missing that happy ending. That's what I hope.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. Well, doing things like this help.
Yeah. I wanted, before I let you go, I did want to pivot, and I have no way to successfully pivot from your story to this topic. But you're a respected actress. You've had a great career, still going strong with different projects. I'm just kind of curious from that perspective, and is honestly more of what I usually talk about in this program. But talk about how you've been able to shift and pivot with the times, because respected a soap opera actress, and then you've done other projects, you've gone online, you've done YouTube series. And I think a lot of stars struggle with that transition or resist it. And I think you've been able to go with the flow and get more with your hands dirty, getting, writing and direct or producing. Just tell me a little bit about how you've pivoted in recent years from a professional point of view, and we'll end on what is hopefully
on a good note. Yes. Hopefully optimistic. Well, I've been in the business since I was 10 years old. I was in Annie on Broadway. I loved performing. And when I was on As the World Turns for almost 20 years, I found this draw to the creative writing side. So at 2008, I was ready to do something different. And I left As the World Turns, but I continued to act a little bit here and there. But I started producing independent projects and using my own money. I was one of the first scripted dramas ever on YouTube, a show called Gotham, before the other Gotham, because I knew there was an audience there, but there was no money. It was just about creativity. So I just kept writing and writing, and I wrote for Bold and the Beautiful, the soap opera Bold and the Beautiful. And I think now, to your point, actors are becoming much more diverse in their resume, because they realize at some point, you're not going to be on TV forever. I mean, that's just a reality. I was fortunate to have 20 years of it, but really you don't have that long of a career, especially women, I would say, have even less of time, which is just the reality. I'm not, I had a great career.
Absolutely.
I had a great career. I mean, listen, there was no financial disparity in our industry, and women made more than men in the daytime community. We led daytime women, right? So I don't have any issue with that at all, quite the opposite. But I felt that whether you are on a soap opera, writing a book, writing a movie, if it's true, you're constantly searching for the truth. And I'll tell you, you might find this very interesting, that when I started investigating this case against my husband, I looked at it from a perspective as a creative, as a writer, not as an investigative reporter, but as a person to find the truth in what was going on.
That's your skill set.
Yes. So I used my skill set for something that has absolutely nothing to do with what I was tasked to do here, which is monumental. Because what I would do is I'd say, well, why would that person do X, Y, and Z? Now, in an actor, you take a scene and you go, well, what do I want? And what am I doing in the scene? And it's very similar when you're trying to get information or learn in a case when you're investigating, because you go, well, what do I want? Well, I want to find out X. How do I find out X? I got to go down Y to see X. So it's very similar in that way. For instance, you go into a court and you sit there and you see the judge and you see the prosecutors, and you see the defendants, you see the jury. I mean, the jury would fall asleep at times and laugh and not pay attention. And as an actor, it's gold. As a person who's a victim, it's hell.
Yeah.
Right. So you see the behavior of people, and that's what I did for a living for my whole life. Yeah. So it does kind of cross into both realities. And when I was writing the book, I knew that a lot of the people who had followed me for years, decades, might not be so interested in the case. But if I tell it in a way that's a narrative similar to a fictional kind of story, maybe I'll keep them interested. Because listen, I have never once had a negative comment after my husband was arrested from any fan that follows me on any platform. Mm-hmm. Now, if that's almost an achievement in itself,
that's right.
Right? Because they know who I am. They trust me. They know Mike. So I'm taking them on this journey with me in this book because I, first of all, respect them and I love them for their support. But they want to know. They're dying to understand what we were feeling and how we were feeling, because that's what they miss about soap operas. Yeah. You know, I'll tell you a quick story. When I've met so many fans over the years, and I went to a diner, and this woman grabbed my hand and she started crying. This was years ago. Mm-hmm. Why are you crying? She said, I was going through cancer, and you kept me alive, because I would sit and watch the show. I didn't have to think about anything for an hour, and I could cry with you, and I could feel with you, and then I could turn the TV off and go back to my own reality. But if you're good at what you do as an actor, that's not an easy task, meaning you have to go into the deepest roots of your heart and soul and open it up like a wound to the audience to let them in and be vulnerable, or else they'll snip that in a second and go, yeah, she's a bad actor. That's a bad actor. So you're going through the screen. So now for the pages, I want to do the same on the page. And I'm not a writer, you know, I'm not a professional novelist or anything like that, but I do know what emotion is. And I do know what heart and feelings are, because I've my whole life dissecting them. So it's very similar in a sense of the outreach to the human spirit that I want to touch, maybe inspire or feel, or, you know, feel. Let's just put feel. Like, we were so detached now in the world from you know, the feelings are 0 to 1,000. But where's the nuance of the feelings? What's it really about when you're suffering and you're angry? There's something else going on, and if you can touch that part, you win, because that's where the soul lives. And I hope people. And I hate to use the word enjoy the book, but I feel like I hope it speaks to them in some way.
Well, I mean, we've just scratched the surface of your story here, but if you want to find more information and get the whole story and just get your perspective on everything that's going on with this particular case, In the Interest of Justice, coming out June 5th at Amazon or other booksellers. Wish you all the best. It's a terrible, terrible story. I think you're doing everything humanly possible to right what appears to be a horrible wrong. And
thank you.
We appreciate you sharing the story and give your best to Mike.
Thank you so much for having me on. It really means a lot. You know, every step is in the right direction, is getting you to the final destination of success. Yeah. Thank you.
A quick update on the story. After we recorded that conversation, Michael McMahon has been told he must serve in a Michigan jail that is 500 miles from the family's home. That seems egregious and punitive in and of itself. There's been a 2-week delay. He's having some health issues, so there's a brief window there that maybe will give them enough time to keep investigating the case, keep fighting on his behalf. But things do look grim for Michael right now. Just want to keep you posted with the latest information. I'll try to share more on social media. You can follow me on Twitter/X at Hollywood in Toto. If I get more information, I will update you there. But that's where we stand right now. It's a really sad story any way you look at it. Well, before we let you go, we've got to honor our character actor of the week. This time it is the late, great Ned Beatty. Well, that's it for this week's show. Again, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And also do check out HollywoodinToto.com. It is my website, formed in 2014. It makes it 11 years old now. And what we try to do there, and certainly here to an extent as well, is cover the stories in entertainment that aren't being covered elsewhere. And as it turns out, there are a lot of stories not being covered. If there's a new Star Wars news blast, you're going to see it everywhere. But other stories kind of lurking just under the surface, that's what we like to cover here because they matter too. And they need exposure and they need people talking about them, like Martha's story, like so many other situations, which I've been covering for years. A lot of censorship related stories, which the mainstream media just wants to look the other way about. Well, not here, not at HollywoodinToto.com, and certainly not at the podcast. And of course, if you want to spread the news about the show, you can click on the like button, you can subscribe, you can tell a friend, maybe even share on social media. We do appreciate it. But for now, have a wonderful week. Doctor's orders.